Dear students, good evening and a warm welcome to CSAT Made Easy 2025 series, where we discuss the most exam specific questions and concepts from the angle of your CSAT paper of 25 year. I am Sachin Gopanad and today's topic of discussion would be reading comprehension. RC, reading comprehension or passages, I would say that it is the most important topic in your CSAT paper. Passing CSAT paper without attempting passages, I would say that is a very difficult task unless you are preparing for some other exam like SSC or banking or CAT. Attempting the other mathematical, that is quantitative aptitude or reasoning questions solely and relying solely on them, I would say that it is a bit of a risk to take. So RC, it is the most important topic and we shall not neglect it. Okay, welcome to today's class. And we will begin with the first question. Now, before beginning with the first question, we will look at the two steps that I told you of in the previous class. To solve RC, I have mentioned two steps, right? We shall look at the two of them. The first step that I told you was to underline key terms in every sentence as you go on reading the passage. What are the benefits of doing that? The benefits of doing that would be, it would give you the crux of that sentence. If you underline in each sentence the key terms, it will help you get the crux of that sentence. Then it will help you memorize the ideas in the passage. Then most of all, it will help you to break the if the passage it can be considered as a block. It will, underlining key terms, it will help you to break that block into little packets of ideas, so that your brain, our mind will be able to easily grasp the content in the passage. That would be the first step. And what is the second step? The second step would be to eliminate options. I had told you that instead of thinking in terms of correct option and the wrong options, instead of thinking in terms of correct answer and wrong answers, think in terms of more appropriate option and less appropriate option. Go on eliminating the less appropriate ones, and the last one to remain, that would be your answer. Also, I have told you steps to eliminate the options. First, eliminate illogical, irrational and extreme options. Okay. Next, eliminate the options that do not agree with the passage. Then eliminate the less appropriate ones, and ultimately you will be remaining with the most appropriate option. All the passages that are asked in your RC in CSAT paper, they would be taken from an article published years ago in a renowned newspaper or journal or some magazine. So they cannot have claimed anything illogical, irrational or extreme. So based on that, we can use these steps to eliminate the options. Also, I think we will discuss 3 or 4 passages in this class. I will leave the website link to each of those original articles. Do visit those websites, do read that article entirely, and then see how much of the entire article they have taken for the passage. That will give you an idea of what to expect in the next CSAT paper. Okay, welcome once again, and now we shall begin with the first question. This is the first question. Let's read it. Unlike religion and science, poetry does not posit or expect any belief in absolute truths. Okay, what is this sentence telling us? This sentence is telling us that religion and science, they present to you some absolute truth. However, poetry does not do that. Okay. What will you underline? You might underline poetry or truth. It is left to you, but you underline such a word which will give you the which will make you memorize the crux or the idea of that is expressed in this sentence. You shall underline that word which will condense the entire idea into a single term. For me, poetry does that. It is not necessary that you also underline poetry. You may underline truth also or some other word. It is no hard and fast rule you should underline the same key term that I did. Anything that makes you recall the idea, that is enough. Okay, let's read the second sentence. Those forces or individuals who claim to have absolute truths in their graphs tend to turn dictatorial and tyrannical. Okay, what is this sentence telling us? It is telling us that there are some forces that claim to know the absolute truth, that claim to have the absolute truth in their hands, and they tend to be dictatorial or tyrannical. I will underline dictatorial. Okay, truth usually does not admit contradictions or imperfections. What does truth not admit? It will not admit contradictions or imperfections. I will underline imperfections. It is Unitarian. What is Unitarian? Truth is Unitarian. Truth does not allow other coexistences. Truth does not allow coexistence of other ideas. When truth establishes itself as the truth, it does not allow other ideas to coexist. So I will underline Unitarian. It is therefore not of much use for poetry. What is not of much use for poetry? Truth is not of much use for poetry. Poetry abides by the plurality of life and existence. So, see the contrast. Truth is Unitarian. However, poetry, it abides by plurality. Okay, so both are contradictory. Okay, poetry abides by plurality of life and existence. Perhaps poetry follows reality which is plural. For poetry, reality itself is plural. So there might be more than one reality. Reality which is plural, anachronistic, that is out of date, not of the not suitable for the present generation or present period of time. Perhaps poetry follows reality which is plural, anachronistic, full of contradictions. So poetry, it is very accepting in nature. Poetry follows reality which is plural, anachronistic, and full of contradictions. I will underline reality which is plural. Against the tyranny of truth, poetry remains partisan of democratic reality. This statement, it calls truth as tyrannical. Okay, against the tyranny of truth, poetry remains partisan of democratic reality. Okay, against the arrogance of power, wealth, and hierarchy, poetry proposes both humility and defiance. What is defiance? Defiance is standing up to some authority. So, against the arrogance of power, wealth, and hierarchy. In other words, against some authority of arrogance, poetry proposes what? Humility and defiance. Okay, we are done with the first step. Now, since I am reading the passage aloud and explaining it to you on the way, it took me so long. However, when you do it on the paper, it will take just a quarter of the time that I took. Okay, and do not worry about time while you are learning. Concentrate on understanding the concept, and time it will catch up eventually. You will with some practice you will be able to solve the questions with less time. Do not worry about that. Okay, let's read the questions and the options now. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed by the above passage? Okay, this was in which year was this asked? This was asked in 24 year, this passage. Okay, it is the poetry, not science or religion, which recognizes and accepts imperfections in humans. Okay, this option agrees with the passage. However, that is not my answer. I cannot come at the correct answer. I cannot come at the most appropriate option before reading all the options. Okay, so I will read all of them and I will choose the most appropriate one. This one, it is a good contender. I will keep it under consideration. Truth is revealed through science or religion, and poetry is anathema to truth. Anathema. What do we understand by poetry is anathema to truth? This is bit of a stretch of an argument. This would be a bit extreme to say. Poetry is anathema to truth. It means that poetry is almost repulsed by truth. Poetry dislikes truth. Poetry, it is very much repulsed, very much in disagreement with truth. However, the passage does not say that actually. How I know? I know that this passage, it talks as a truth as tyrannical and dictatorial, and poetry as celebrating plurality. However, poetry is not anathema to truth. That would be a bit of a stretch of an argument. Why? Because poetry does not accept the tyranny or the Unitarian property of truth. However, poetry does not dislike truth itself. Poetry does not like the arrogant authority of truth. Poetry does not accept the arrogant authority of truth. Instead, it celebrates multiple realities. In other words, it celebrates multiple truths. Okay, so I will reject option B. Let's look at option C now. Poetry is romantic, imaginary, and is about feeling, whereas science and religion are about truth. Okay, this is a good contender. It is quite in agreement with the passage. We'll keep it. In a world of violence, tyranny, and bigotry, poetry is a form of dynamic resistance. I know that this passage does not directly talk about violence or bigotry. However, from after reading it, we can say that this passage has been written in this context. So we will keep this one also. And dynamic resistance, it agrees with the defiance. Okay. Now we are left with 3 options, and we will read each of them one by one again, and we will eliminate the less appropriate one. Before reading option A, we will go to option C again. I will tell you why. Poetry is romantic, imaginary, and about feeling, whereas science and religion are about truth. This option, it is very well in agreement with the passage. However, I will reject this one. I will tell you why. This, yes, this passage says this, yes. However, is it the most important message being conveyed by the passage? No, right? The passage only uses this as an introduction. This message, it is used by the passage only for introduction. Based on that, they built something else. Based on this concept, the passage builds something else. So the passage uses this as only a foundation, but this is not the main message that the passage is telling. Yes, the passage says poetry talks about other than truth. Poetry, reality or truth is not of much use for poetry. However, science and religion, they claim to know absolute truth. So, but the passage only uses this as a introduction to build something else. So, I will reject option C. Then I will reject option A also. I will tell you why. It is poetry, not science or religion, which recognizes and accepts imperfections in humans. Yes, once again, I will reject option A for the same reason that I rejected option C. Yes, where is it? Yes. Truth usually does not admit contradictions, and science and religion, they know absolute truth. So, in a way, science and religion do not accept or do not recognize the imperfection in humans, yes, and poetry does, yes. But is this a message of the passage? No. They have established this and then built some other idea based on this. So, I will reject option A also. Now, look at option D. In a world of violence, tyranny, and bigotry, poetry is a form of dynamic resistance. Yes, this is what the passage finally conveyed after building one idea upon another. What are the ideas that the passage built upon? Religion and science, truth, tyranny, dictatorship, and then Unitarianness. Then poetry, plurality, democratic reality, and ultimately defiance against arrogance. So, what is the ultimate message that the passage is conveying to us? Based on these concepts, one idea upon another, building one idea upon another, ultimately what the this passage tells us is poetry is a form of defiance. In other words, resistance. Yes. To arrive at this, they used the rest of the concepts as foundation or steps to lead to ultimately this message. So, for this reason, we will choose option D. I know that this is one of the most difficult passages to have asked in CSAT paper, but do not worry, if you understood this one, the next questions will be easy, and the actual questions asked in the CSAT paper, they would usually be easier than this. This is one of the most difficult questions to have been asked. Okay, let's look at another question now. The respect and value for teachers' profession faded away when money came into play, leading to teachers becoming service providers and students becoming customers. Okay, what are we talking about here? We are talking about teachers' profession, and what else? Teachers' profession becoming service providers. when money came into existence. Okay. While we celebrate film actors, sports personalities, politicians, entrepreneurs, social activists and influencers, why don't we also celebrate and appreciate teachers who act as an important pillar for the betterment of society? So why are we not celebrating teachers? I will underline celebrate. Okay. Some teachers do not work solely for their salary but strive to enhance student lives academically. Strive to enhance students' life academically, socially, economically and even spiritually. So some teachers, they strive to enhance students' lives. Okay. These teachers deserve to be celebrated every day. Once again, deserve to be celebrated. Celebrating teachers isn't just about holding an event once a year or ignoring them for the rest of the time. So what will we underline? Once again, I think we should underline about holding an event once a year and ignoring them for the rest of the time. I will underline not ignoring them. Okay. It is okay. You might want to understand some other, you might want to underline some other key term, that is okay. Do go with that. But when you read this underlined key term, you should be able to recollect the idea that has been presented in the sentence. Okay, let's go to the question and the options now. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed by the passage? First option, there might be some teachers, though not all, who work solely for their salary. Yes, because if this sentence says that, where does it say? Here, right? Some teachers do not work solely for their. So when they say that some teachers do not work solely for their salary, but to enhance students' lives, there might be some teachers who work solely for their salary. Yes, it is in agreement with the passage. However, we will reject it because it is not conveying the message of the passage. This is only just one idea that comes in somewhere in between. The idea is something else. The main idea of this passage is something else. This is one idea that comes somewhere in between. So this is not the main idea. We will reject it. Society should show lasting respect, love and gratitude for its teachers. Okay, very good option. Let's keep it. Teacher's profession is a thankless one. Yes, because they are telling us that they have been considered service providers and they are being celebrated only once a year. Okay. Teachers play a huge role in enhancing students' life academically, socially, economically and spiritually. This is also in agreement with the passage. However, I will reject this one. Why? Because this is not the main idea of the passage, the main message of the passage. The passage uses this idea to tell us what? To tell us that since teachers are doing this job, since teachers are playing a huge role in enhancing students' life, we need to celebrate. Why are we not celebrating it? And why should we celebrate it? The passage gives this reason. So this is not the main message of the passage. The passage uses this as the reason to establish its argument. What is the argument? The argument is that we are not celebrating teachers and we should celebrate teachers. So for that reason, I will reject option D. So now we are left with two options. Now we can reject option C because the explanation that I gave you for option D, I think you can use the same explanation for option C also. Teacher's profession is a thankless one. Yes, it is mentioned in the passage where because they have been considered only service providers and then they are not appreciated, they are not celebrated. Yes, but is it the main message of the passage? No, the main message of the passage is yes, teachers play a huge role, then they are not being celebrated. So what should we do? Why are we not celebrating them? We should be celebrating them. So that is the message of the passage. What is the message? Society should show lasting respect, love and gratitude for teachers. In other words, society should celebrate teachers. Celebrate, this word, it means we use the word celebrate in the only context of festivals and other such thing where we celebrate parties, functions, festivals. However, celebrating it has another meaning also. For example, you might call a film as the most celebrated film of that director, of this is the most celebrated book of this year. So celebrate means it means to accept and appreciate. In this context, we can take the meaning as accept and appreciate. Okay, or becoming famous, something like that. Okay, so we will choose option B as our answer. Why? Because when they are asking us for the message conveyed, so that is the entirety, what is it arguing for, the entirety of the passage, what is it arguing for, we'll choose that one as our answer. Once again, message conveyed, it is bit of a difficult topic to answer, but still it is okay. If you are able to understand this one in your actual examination, you will be able to answer the questions easily. Okay, let's look at this question. This is your homework question. I will read the passage and you shall answer this one and leave your answers in the comment section. We will discuss the answer in the next class. Nowadays, there is a growing trend to use interconnected home devices. As consumers increasingly network their homes, the connected home device manufacturers and service providers will seek to overcome thin profit margin by gathering more of our personal data with or without agreement, turning the home into corporate storefront. Corporate marketers will have powerful incentives to observe consumer behavior to understand the buying needs and preferences of the device owner. And the question is asking for the message conveyed. Do read all the 4 options and eliminate the less appropriate ones, and you will land with the correct one. Okay. And now it is time to answer the homework question for the previous class. The previous class, it was also on reading comprehension, right? What was the passage? This was written: to tackle the problem of pollution in cities, policymakers think that drastic actions like temporary use of odd even number scheme for vehicles, closing schools, factories, construction activities, and banning the use of certain type of vehicles are a way forward. So this sentence, it is talking disapprovingly about some of the measures that authorities are taking to tackle the problem of pollution in cities. It is talking disapprovingly, not approvingly. So what will I underline? I will underline drastic action, pollution in cities. Okay. Then even then the air is not clean. Okay. I will underline even then. That is enough for me. I know that this is not a key term. However, when I look at this even then I will get the context. The passage is telling that even then air has not been clean. Okay. Vehicles more than 15 years old comprise 1% of the total, and taking them off the road will not make any difference. I will underline 15 years old. What 15 years old? Vehicles of 15 years old, they comprise only 1% of the total vehicles on the road. So it doesn't make any difference. So it is talking disapprovingly of this this measure. Okay. Banning certain fuels and car types arbitrarily is not proper. So I will underline banning arbitrarily. Okay. Diesel engines produced more PM 2.5 and less CO2 than petrol or CNG engines. So diesel engines, they produce what? More PM 2.5 and less CO2 than petrol or CNG engines. On the other hand, diesel and CNG engines produce more NOx. So if you, for example, diesel fuel engines, they produce one harmful chemical, one harmful gas, and CNG engines, they produce another harmful gas. So it would be arbitrary to ban one type of fuel engines. So you will underline diesel engine, then CNG engines. No one has measured the amount of NOx that CNG engines are emitting. You will underline no one has measured. Okay, it means that there has not been a scientific study. When they say that no one has measured, it means that there has not been a scientific study of how much NOx that CNG engines are emitting. Arbitrary bans on vehicles that have passed mandated fitness test and periodic pollution tests are unfair. This is true. So when you go on banning certain types of vehicles arbitrarily, even though they have passed fitness test and pollution test, that would be unfair. What is needed is the scientific and reliable information about the source of pollutants on a continuing basis and technologies that will work to reduce pollution for them. So what do we want? We want scientific and reliable information, and we want technologies that will work to reduce pollution from them. Okay. What is the implication of this passage? What is the rational and logical implication from this passage? Arbitrary curbs on vehicles to reduce pollution are difficult to implement. No, this passage, it is talking disapprovingly of arbitrary curbs on vehicles, but it is not telling us that that is difficult to implement. No, it is telling us that it is not effective. That's all. So we'll reject option A. Knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. Yes, very good, very good. It agrees very much with the passage. Let's look at option C. A heavy penalty should be enforced on those driving without periodical pollution test. No. About pollution tests, the passage says that even though some vehicles have passed pollution test, the authorities have been banning their use and it is unfair. So they are not telling us that penalty should be enforced on those driving. There is no talk about that at all. Okay. Look at option D. In the absence of laws to deal with problems of pollution, the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. Yes. This is in agreement. This is in agreement. However, there is no mention of absence of laws. Okay. Still, option B and D, they are our final contenders, and we need to reject one of them. I think we will reject option D. Why? Because what is it talking about? In the absence of laws to deal with problems of pollution, the administration tend to make arbitrary decisions. Yes. And look at option B. Knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. This is conveying more comprehensively what the passage is implying. This is only conveying only one part of the passage, because the passage uses this as only at the introduction part. However, this option B, it carries the gist of the whole passage. This option, it carries the whole gist of the passage. Knee-jerk reactions, yes, because they are doing arbitrary actions, they are taking arbitrary actions. And then effective based approach, yes, scientific information technologies are needed, so that then it would be more effective. So we'll reject option D, and option B would be your answer. This might seem a bit confusing. However, with practice you will be able to answer. Practice the questions on RC using the 2 steps that I mentioned, and with a bit of practice, just after solving 10 to 15 passages, you will really get the hang of it. Okay. And I hope that you found today's class helpful and beneficial to you. If you liked the class, do watch the class regularly. We upload one episode every evening, and do share the YouTube link to this video with your friends on WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups. All the best, and most of all, a very happy studying.